What's going on, Affected? It's Wolf with the Quarantine, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a game that was sent to me to review by the name of 878 Vikings, the Viking Age expansion. Now, rather than talk about how these are, I did review 878 Vikings. If you want to check that out, I will, if I remember, I'll have a link up here. But rather than talk about the thing here, I'll show you all the components, and I'll just talk about them in the final thoughts. Alright, so the Viking Age expansion for 878 Vikings has 8 different components to it. So the first one is the War of Land and Gods. Now, this effectively gives the Viking player an alternate goal. So in the base game, your objective is to conquer territory. That's it. And it could be very difficult, especially depending on how the English player or players are playing. It could be super difficult to try to hold on to that many territories. Now, this gives you an alternative win condition because you are given churches. Well, the English player are given churches. There are a total of 14 churches, and they have to put those in cities around the board. Now, if the Viking player can conquer, they don't have to hold, but if they can conquer all of the cities that have churches, at some point they basically burn them down, and then they give the burnt churches to the enemy player. The enemy player can then spend those in any battle to add a feared card to the battle. So that includes open battle, which really sucks for the Viking player because the peasants are not very happy that you burn down their churches. And if at any time the Viking player can burn down all the churches, then the Viking player wins. Now, it also gives the Viking player the opportunity to build Viking forts and upgrade them to Viking settlements. At the end of a Viking player's turn, they can get rid of 2 Norsemen, and then they can add a Viking settlement, which basically is now a defensive stronghold. The Viking player now holds that territory without needing to keep troops there. They can leave everybody, and the settlement's just there. And it has 1 hit point for all intent and purpose of battle and everything, but it gives you a black and a red die, which is really cool. It defends itself. You can maybe put a couple troops behind. It's a lot easier to hold. And then the Viking player can choose also at the end of every round to flip one of those instead of adding one, and it gives them a settlement, which gives them 1 black Norseman at the beginning of every round during their reinforcement phase, which is pretty cool, and it gives 1 red die to the battle. So it gets a little harder to defend itself during like an enemy player or enemy's turn, but it now gives you a steady influx of troops. And if you have a bunch of these, you can imagine how devastating that could wind up being for the English player, that now the Vikings are just getting tons and tons of people. So this expansion I love. I will not play without this part of the expansion, because in the base game there are going to be certain points of time when you're going to be looking at the board going, there's no way, there is no way. And it gives the English player a little bit more to stress about, because now not only do they have to hold their cities, they also have to go, okay, well, they can't abandon areas now because you're going to be 1 step closer. Like in the base game, there's a lot of times the English player will just, screw it, they can have this city because we're going to garrison on this one, because this one gives us recruits, and we're going to hold up here and brr. And now when they do that, they're going to pay for that because the Viking player is going to burn those churches. But it also self-balances, because if I burn that church, I give it to the English player. The English player can now use that and devastate me in a battle. They can attack one of my cities, and they get peasants for it. And it can really shift the tide of battle. Now, the second module for this is called the Kingdoms module. Now, in the base game, the main map of England is split into 4 kingdoms. They're just different colored regions, and there wasn't really a lot of reason why. Some cards referred to some regions, but that was really the only reason. And now this gives an actual reason. So the English player starts off with the English side of all the regions face up. They're just cards that show the region. Now, if at any point in time the Viking player controls a number of cities that's shown in the top right corner, then they get the other side of that card, which is the Viking side. Now, these give just static powers and abilities, like being able to enter swamps, or placing reinforcement, or your fled units in different areas, or early, or you get free stuff, or stuff. So it gives you a reason to try to hold on to cities. Now, if the Viking player gets those, the powers are a little different on the other side that now the Viking player gets, so it helps them out. So now the Viking player now it's relevant, okay, where are they going to invade? What power do they want? Okay, well, I invade up here, Now it lets me do this super awesome thing. Now I can retreat units into a special area, stuff like that. It basically gives you another thing to think about where you're going to invade. Now, this one is also one that I will probably always add to the game because it doesn't add a lot of complexity, whereas the first one does add a little bit more, well, actually a lot bit more complexity. This one doesn't add much more complexity. It just gives, it almost feels natural and right, because of just it makes sense. This region is this. Hold on to most of this to try to not let the Viking player get forward. That's it. That's all this expansion adds, and it's great. It gives those regions purpose. Now, Module 3 is the King's module. Now, there are 4 King cards in the deck, and these are just super powered, like ridiculously powerful kings that each player is going to get, and you can just play them like an event whenever the card says that. That's all they do. These ones, I don't think I'm going to be using too much more because some of them are clearly better than others. There's one of them that allows, the one that I don't like, namely, is it allows me to play it and I just get your hand and you get my hand. But the problem that I didn't like about that is the event cards for the English player don't really work that well with the Vikings and vice versa. So it seems like it's the worst one. But some of the other ones are just insanely powerful. Like there's one that I can just move move one of your armies out of a city. You get out of the city. And then you get to go, okay, you can't go here, 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 here. And that could also be super devastating. Like, those king cards are disgustingly powerful. I don't think I'm actually going to add the kings to the base game at all. Now, Module 4 is Runes and Prayer. Now, this one's probably my favorite one out of this because this one adds, the English were, they're Christians. They rely on, praying to God and hoping God helps them. The Vikings had the belief of pretty much fate and destiny. It's written in stone, and what happens, happens. Now, this, before every battle, it allows you to roll all 4 of your prayer or rune dice, and then you're going to spend the symbols on them for what's on your card. Now, it's kind of a risk-reward system because the Viking runes, 4 out of the 6 sides are runes. Really good. But 2 of them also give the enemy, the English player, these little chalice symbols that they spend for their best ability. So I can use it, you don't have to. You can use it, I don't have to. We both can use it, we can both choose not to. We just have to choose before any dice are rolled. And you can wind up rolling them, and I can just help you by mistake. And it adds another element of luck to the game, but it adds like a risk-reward system. Because if you're in a battle that you're probably going to lose, for example, as the Viking player, and you roll 3 runes, which chances are you're going to, you basically trigger your Ragnarok ability, and everybody who dies instead goes to the flee area. So you're just going to get them back your next turn, which is awesome. But then the English player also has Martyrdom, where they don't get to command out, and those ones are ones they have to spend. So you wind up having to, do we really want to risk this? I've seen a battle go south for the English player purely because they didn't roll well on that die, and it's so satisfying as a Viking player. This one I will add to every single game. It just adds another layer. Granted, a little bit of luck, but it's manageable luck, and it gives you another thing. Do I want to risk this? And I love that. Module 4 is the Relics and Holy Sites expansion. Now, this one is a little fiddly and adds a lot more complexity to the game. While I like this one, at the beginning of the game, the English player you're going to shuffle up these little chip things, and you're going to give the English player 2 of them, and you're probably going to want to hand them the book here because it has their little holy relics, and they give you things like you can now move into swamps or just random one here. Whenever you draw a fjord card, you get to add the listed units to a battle when attacking Viking cities instead. So that one is really good. There's Oswald's Tree, for example. If you win a battle, one of your dead troops just go to it's like a resurrection tree, and so those are really strong abilities. But some of them, if they fall into the hands of the Viking player and they're controlled by them, the Viking player gets a benefit. So it just gives you another strategic point to either attack or defend a lot more. I do thoroughly like that, but Viking player also gets Viking Relics, which are really cool. The first 2 leaders that come out, you're going to randomly shuffle the Viking Relics, and you're going to give each leader one of those at the beginning of the game. You're going to draw them before the game, but the first 2 Vikings are going to get them, if that makes sense. And these also give them super special abilities, like I think I got Mjolnir the last game we played, and that one just makes it to where event cards can't be played on your leader. So it gives them special abilities. But the English, if they kill that leader, they can capture those relics, but the English player does not get a benefit from those. It just keeps them out of the Viking hands. Now, that part of it, I don't know how I feel about, because where the Viking player can take the sites from the English player, and a lot of them they just get a benefit. I get why they do it, because the Viking player has to be the aggressor here, so it's going to be super easy, given some bad luck, that the English player will take the Viking relics. But I mean, it is good. It just adds a level of fiddliness to the game, because just maybe fiddliness isn't the right word. The fact that you have to look in here, and if they're to be able to see what they do, and I wish there was like a quick reference card or something that had them listed on it, so it's just a little easier, because especially if it's a relic that you're not really going to use that often. For example, one of the relics allows you to retreat 2 instead of 1 into an area and you can also retreat into an area that doesn't have your own units. And that one didn't get used that much, because a lot of the time that's not a great idea. And so when they did need to use it, they couldn't remember what it did, so they had to look in the book, and I just would have liked a card to make it a little easier. It's definitely something I will probably add, but not if I'm playing with a new player. Now, Module 6 is the Legends expansion. Now, this one I'll use in every single game. It just adds another little objective and goal. And these are just every leader gets one for the Viking player, and every turn the English player collectively gets 1 card at the beginning of every round, starting with the second. Now, these are just special little goals. For example, the Viking player, one of theirs is like if the English player rolls a total of 5 retreat or command on their dice, basically nobody actually fights, you can flip it over. And now what this does is, if the Viking player completes one of theirs, they get to remove one of their needed tokens off of the board. They didn't need to control a location with it, they just need to remove one from the board, which is super cool. It makes it a little easier for them to accomplish theirs. The English player does the opposite. It adds another one to the board, so they take one from out of the game and add it, making it a little harder. Now, this one's really cool. Now, it does feel kind of random, some of the things, like I said, you got to roll those 5. It's it's out of your control whether or not that happened. So I will definitely be adding these, because some of them are really cool, but some of them are also kind of BS and unfair. Definitely wouldn't use this with a new player. Module 7 is the Epic Battle Events. Right out of the gates, I'm going to use this in every single game, because that Fjord deck is the bane of the Viking player's existence. And what this does is it adds epic cards to the Fjord deck. And there's only ever going to be 3. There's a whole bunch of them. I don't remember exactly how many. I'm trying to glance here. I don't see. But you're only ever going to take 3 of them, and you're going to shuffle them into that deck. Once they're drawn, they're moved off to the side, and then once you go through the deck and you have to reshuffle, you just add 3 more to the deck, random ones, and shuffle it again. Now, some of these cards are real bad for the English player. But, like, there's a traitor card, which is great. You choose 1 color, and that now fights the Vikings. It's super cool. But a lot of them are super good for the English player. It helps kind of balance those scales, but now it's a little more risky. And this one I will always use if I'm using the churches, because it makes the English player go, do I want to burn one of my churches and draw one of these? Because it's kind of risky, and I love that. I will use this in every game, like no questions asked. That expansion is great. And the last module, which I will also use in every single expansion, is the Viking ships. And actually I lied, there are 9, not 8, because I'm dumb. But this one I use in every expansion as well. It is the Viking ships expansion. Now, all this one does is when the Vikings first invade an area, they place a Viking ship down. Now, those Viking ships are all considered adjacent. It just gives the Viking player a little bit more flexibility to move around. That way, when they invade, they're not stuck to this one little area. If shit goes south, they can back out and come down somewhere else that they maybe have another ship at. Now, the English player can just burn those ships down if they ever enter that area, which it makes the Viking player now have to have a strategic location that they need to protect as well. So I definitely recommend using this one as well, because, like I said, it gives the player, the Viking player, a little more flexibility, but it also forces them to ground themselves. I will always use this with the church and settlement part of the expansion as well, because, you know, a good thing to do for the Viking player is to, you know, they invade an area, build a city there as well, and move off, because it gives them a strategic location to protect, and it gives them a reason to protect it. And it gives keeps the pressure on the English player. And the English player can use that to their advantage and have a big army just waiting, forcing the Viking player to keep troops there. So it kind of balances itself out there. Now, the last one, and this time for real, is also one that I will use in every single expansion. This one is the Legendary Leaders expansion. Now, this one gives an alternative A leader, so your first leader, it's an alternative one. I personally like to do it random, so I don't know which one it is. This guy's got a really cool ability where the first round of combat, any command that the English player uses is actually just a retreat for them instead. Super cool. He gets 15 and 8, I think it is, yeah. And he invades on the North Sea coast. This one is really cool. It gives you that, you know, you can't pre-plan. You now have to go, okay, well, if I get this guy, awesome. But if not, and I get the base game guy, I have to work with that. If I'm not mistaken, the base game guy comes with more troops. But it also comes with, what's her name, Lagertha. Now, Lagertha is really cool. She starts face up with 2 Norsemen and 1 Berserker on her. At any time you invade with a leader, you can split that leader's troops up between the two however you want, and then now you have 2 leaders that can invade in, like, pincer or whatever. And I love that. I really do, because it gives you 2 areas now that you can assault from, but it makes the armies smaller. So you now have to think, okay, do I want to do that? For example, one game I didn't even use her at all, because it was more effective for me to invade with just one gross strong army than it was to split that army up, because I was already gonna have to be pulling pieces off. But then I played another game where it was more advantageous for me to invade north and south, forcing the English to split their troops. And, you know, I think Lagertha wound up dying, but it allowed me to then, you know, in the next round invade in the middle, where it was nice and clear and spread out, get into strongholds and everything. So it gives you a lot more strategic flexibility with the Vikings. So my final verdict here is, if you like 878 Vikings, there is no reason you should not get that Viking Age expansion. While some of the modules there I wasn't a huge fan of, overall, fantastic. It adds just more strategizing, and more depth to an already fantastic game. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time in the quarantine.